All right, welcome back to another episode of Siblings in Crime. I'm Allie Rossell.
And I'm Blake Murphy.
And just as it sounds, we are siblings who love true crime.
Yes, love it.
Yes, we're back. We did test, last week we did a conspiracy.
Yes.
It does seem like YouTube doesn't like those words. We did find that out the hard way.
Yeah.
So now we know. We're still going to do them. We like them. We'll continue to do them. But today, we're going to mix it up. And we're going to go back to what we know best. Murder, attempted murder, all that kind of
Missing people.
Missing people.
Mysteries.
So that's what we're going to be doing today. But before then, like always, please like, subscribe, comment. It means the world to us.
Friend.
It really helps us out. Nice friend. Are we really on Facebook?
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't even know we're on Facebook. So literally across the board, find us wherever we're at. Siblings in Crime Pod, everywhere. Thank you. Blake, before we get into it, how was your week?
My week was great. One thing that was kind of fun this week is I went to California with Tatum for a day. She's basically driving out there, and so I just drove out there with her and then caught a flight home. And then I might go also tomorrow if I get all my work stuff done.
She on vacation?
No, she's working.
Oh, sweet.
But she's going to be, I think, a half day tomorrow, and then she's driving to Vegas for some family stuff. So then I'll come home because I work this weekend.
Nice. Sounds like a fun time.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a lot of travel.
Yes.
That's sweet. I've been traveling a lot, too. And if I can figure out how to put a little round of applause, I passed my first proficiency check. Thank you. So super excited about that. It should not be as stressful as it is. It's my very first one, so I was a little nervous. But luckily, I'll be a pilot for another year now. So we'll have that same applaud when Blake passes in a couple months when you have yours come up.
Yeah.
So that's all I really did. Was in Utah and then came back here for a couple days. Go back to Utah. Nothing cool, new routine or anything like that. My knees have been hurting me. Marathon's not looking bright for next week, so we'll see how that report goes. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think people are born dangerous or they become dangerous?
I think it's both. I mean, I think some people become dangerous through their circumstances, but then I think other people are kind of have a more crazy side of them. So yeah, I think both.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes people get dealt a hand that it's not excusable, but you can also see people going down darker paths leading to more danger. Mm-hmm. But today, in today's case, normal people. We have regular live people. So no crazy.
Regular live people?
Yeah, people living their regular lives.
Regular people that are alive.
Yeah, yeah. None of the signs of dangerous traits. And so sometimes the scariest stories don't start with like screams and arguments and heated discussions. And sometimes they just start with a casual hello, a quiet day in a small town. And this episode isn't about a monster lurking in the dark woods. It's not about love triangle or any money or anything like that. All the usual signs of like some horrible acts. In today's story, it's about a curious someone hiding in plain sight. Someone no one questioned until it was nearly too late. This is the recent case of Gary Lewis and Darren Harris. You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's roll. Darren Harris had crafted a life of predictability and trust. At 58, he lived with his wife in a quiet corner of North Yorkshire. Yorkshire. I've been fumbling my words. He had no children that we know of that are on the record. No drama, a quiet home, and a career that demanded precision. Darren had worked for the NHS, the National Health Service in Europe, since 1996. First as a porter. Have you ever heard of the term porter?
Nope.
Me neither. I was like, what the heck is that? I guess, yeah. And it didn't even like give a definition. I was like, everyone's supposed to know what that is. A porter in a hospital setting is like the support staff where basically they run around patients, like equipment, medications, all the stuff. They're like running the errands.
Equipment guy?
Yeah, equipment guy. So they're like crucial to have, but they're not like in critical situations. Then after that, he qualified as an anesthetic practitioner in 2000. So by 2019, he had earned a senior position in the cardiothoracic theaters at James Cook University Hospital. To colleagues, he was unremarkable in like the best way possible, I guess you can say.
Unremarkable?
He was, he was like
he was just there.
He was just, all right, we're back.
Had to take a quick break.
Yeah, we had a little intermission. Blake had some business to attend to. So I got to the gym. Now my hair's in a ponytail. But glad to be back. Finish it up. The last thing we talked about was how his colleagues saw him. How we said he was unremarkable.
Oh, yeah.
But in the best way. He was punctual, reliable, calm under pressure. I feel like that's kind of what coworkers always say. They're like,
Calm under pressure is kind of cool, though.
Yeah, I guess that's a good trait to have.
But he kind of just was like in the shadows. Like he has not noticed.
Yeah, he does.
Poor
his
guy,
job.
actually.
He comes, he goes, he does what he's supposed to.
Poor guy.
No, I mean,
he wants to be recognized, I bet.
I mean, it sounds like he was looked at in a positive light overall. So I guess that's a good thing.
Because it's after the fact.
That's a good point. That could be a factor. But away from the sterile lights of the operating room, Darren nurtured a quieter passion. Well, kind of quieter. Music. Records, specifically. He was a vinyl enthusiast who built a collection.
Violent?
Vinyl. You know, like record players?
Oh, vinyl.
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah. I got it. I got it
good
now.
Stuff. Yeah. He built a collection with care and intention. He liked rock, punk, glam. David Bowie was his favorite. Have you ever heard of that guy?
No.
I know. I was like, who the heck is that? We're going to have to play a little clip of something because I was like, is he famous?
Yeah.
He's an oldies.
Ground control to Major Tom.
But
have you heard those guys on TikTok that make all the new songs into like 50s music?
No.
Oh, I'll show you.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of weird, but it's funny. I think they're from Arizona.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, show me. I want to see. That's interesting.
It's like an Arizona park that they film in.
Really? That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. It sounds like something Darren would like. He had plans to convert a room in his house actually to a dedicated music room. So driving to independent record shops wasn't just a hobby. It's like a ritual for him. He's like, he loves to go.
It's like QT.
Yeah, it's like QT every day for you. Except for Darren, it was a 40-minute drive.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty out of his way to go to the shops that he liked, to be able to kind of browse and file through all the different options. I mean, we live right next to QT, so it makes sense that's a daily habit for you. Multiple daily habit.
Like 5 or 6.
No, it's not 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know it was that often.
I'm driving a lot.
That's true. You do drive a lot. But this is like this is like what he was up to on late May 2024. There was a place that he really liked. It was called Better Days Records in Northallerton, England. And this is where he would drive the 40 minutes to go see all the different vinyls and stuff. Mm-hmm. This place was tucked away on a quiet North Yorkshire. I always stutter on that street. Better Days Records was the kind of place that was not shouting for attention, although it had a ton of music inside. It was like the kind of place where you kind of walk by and you see the name on the glass, but it's not like neon lights and the
kind
guy.
Kind of like the guy.
Yeah. So kind of low key, did its purpose, whatever.
Calm under pressure.
Yeah, great. Although it seems like a homey, welcoming place once you're inside with like a comfortable smell of old vinyl and vintage jukeboxes, actually. Behind the counter, we had Gary Lewis. Gary was the store owner. He was there every single day. Everyone knew Gary. He's been there for years at this point. Gary didn't need to introduce himself, like I said. You knew who he was from the moment you walked in. He had served more than 30 years in the police force, most of them in Cleveland. He didn't do a desk job, not a headline chaser, but he did like the nitty gritty. He was out on the force doing what cops do. Mm-hmm. He was just a man who did his job and went home as well. Reliable and respectable. We have a lot of guys who seem like
just doing their job.
Just doing their jobs.
Living life.
That's what I meant in the very beginning when I said they had just the most casual life ever, it seemed. After retiring, Gary didn't disappear into leisure or hobbies. That's when he opened his small little record shop. People came not just for the records, but for him. Better Days became a place to browse, talk, and hang out. And Gary, he was the kind of person you could pass every day without knowing the depth of what he'd seen and the strength he's had to carry from his occupation prior.
Oh.
He had kids, a circle of close friends, and a reputation of being calm and decent. The kind of guy who showed up early, left late, and didn't need recognition. So this visit, like I said, on May 29th was short. Darren came in, he browsed, he actually sold a few records to Gary, and then left. Gary Lewis remembered him as pleasant, but just like another collector. But then Darren returned on July 2nd. So now it's like over a month later. Gary's making his route back to Better Days Records. That Thursday morning, he parked behind the shops and arrived at Better Days just after 10 a.m. The town was quiet. A warm breeze drifted along the high street. Darren was unhurried. He entered the shop, browsed the bins, and spoke to Gary again. They talked about setting up his music room, retirement, bought a few new records, and then he left. So you got to picture this day. It's kind of a long day. So then he left, only to return later around noonish. So he went down shopping some more, came back around noon. He asked about other artists, purchased more, friendly, casual. Then he left again. He dropped into the vintage shop next door, run by Susan Allen. I guess she had like all things antique type of thing. And he told her he worked in the hospital, 24 years in the NHS. Literally the whole shebang. I guess maybe that's what small town folk do.
Yeah, just chat.
Wouldn't know. Yeah, wouldn't know. They're just out on the patio type of thing, having their small talk. She found him polite, maybe even a little charming. And then at 1:38, he returned again to Better Days Records for the third time. So he's had a little bit of an eventful morning, afternoon.
Yeah, he spent all day in that little area.
I know. And I'll have to show you a picture because it's like the cutest little small town, but it's like your basic downtown where they all look like little brick buildings and it's like a one road.
Yeah.
So it's like you spend a lot of time on one road. Mm-hmm. The third visit felt no different than the ones before. The record shop was calm, embracing the soft ambience of spinning vinyl and the faint hum of the midday breeze filtering through the open door. Gary was behind the counter, sorting a stack of sleeves with practiced ease. Darren wandered the aisles slowly, letting his fingers drift along the edges of plastic covers, his gaze unreadable. He approached the counter casually. Gary looked up, likely expecting another question about Bowie or maybe a recommendation of some sort. But in the next second, the air inside the shop changed. With the motion so quick, it barely registered. Darren stepped forward and drove a needle into Gary's right buttocks, booty, cheek, whatever you want to say, bum. Drove a needle into his bum. There was no raised voices. There was no argument, just the single puncture.
He's like...
And yeah, how weird.
Yeah.
And so like, obviously, Gary freaks out, turns around, like, what the hell was that, he says.
Yeah.
And Darren dryly answered, "Only water, mate." That's a quote. If I was Gary, I would be freaking out.
With like a shot?
Yeah. Like
you squirt like all the way in?
Right. And Gary, I mean, he has years of experience on the force. He's like, that for sure wasn't a knife. It was way too thin. He's like, so he's thinking it's a needle. He's like, but what the heck was that injection? And I can't imagine being in a random store and getting it randomly injected by some random person.
Yeah, that's weird.
That would freak me out so bad. But, as you imagine.
And a guy that keeps coming back. It's like, maybe he's like onto something or building his confidence to like do it. Like, kind of creepy. Yeah.
And, I mean, for Gary's perspective.
It's not like robbing him.
Right. Gary's perspective, he's probably like, all right, this guy must really be bored. Like, he must really like music and vinyls. Like, I can't imagine from his perspective what he's thinking. I imagine he's getting a little suspicious of like that behavior. But, I mean, as you'd imagine, it's not water.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like 0 chance it's water. It was rocuronium.
Oh.
Any medical people, I know I offend everybody with my pronunciations, don't care.
Yeah.
But according to ChatGPT, I was like, hey, dumb this down because I'm just a girl. I don't know anything.
Just a small girl.
I'm just a small girl. And according to the internet, It's like a powerful hospital drug used to temporarily paralyze patients during surgery.
Oh, that's weird.
Terrifying. I guess it stops the muscles from moving, including the muscles that control your breathing. So doctors can safely insert breathing tubes and operate without resistance. It's like completely safe, used by trained professionals with the right machines and monitoring. Obviously, we're not in that environment. Outside of a hospital, without the ventilation or support, it can obviously be deadly. Within minutes, it can lock every muscle in your body, including your lungs, leaving you fully conscious but unable to move, speak, or breathe.
Jeez, that's scary.
Isn't that horrifying?
I wonder how they figured that out. Like, found that
This
drug.
medicine?
Yeah.
They're like, all right, who wants to be the sample guy? Yeah, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Gary could feel it instantly. His limbs grew heavy, his breath shallowed. Panic surged as instinct battled physiology. He knew what was happening. He'd seen this before, not this specifically, but he's seen.
Say what the?
But he's been on like emergency calls. He's been to hospitals. He's seen like bad situations occur, and he knows like if his body's shutting down, like he has a little time.
It's not water, mate.
Yeah, he's like, it's not water, mate. Exactly. But this time, it was happening to him. And to put it in perspective, I guess the standard adult dose for a rapid sequence induction is about 0.6 to 1.2 milligrams per kilograms of body weight. So for like a typical, like let's say like a 75 gram, like 165 pound, that's like what I would know. I don't know anything about kilogram stuff. For 165 pounds, that's 45 to 90 milligrams that you would use medicine. The drug works in under a minute and lasts for about 30 to 60 minutes.
Okay.
So not a big dosage to put you under for quite a while.
Yeah.
Gary was injected with 100 milligrams. This dose would have been enough to put a surgical patient under for nearly an hour with the proper medical team and machines. But obviously, Gary wasn't sedated. He wasn't intubated. He wasn't even warned. It was up to 4 times what would have been needed in a controlled environment. And he got it just standing up in his record shop.
Yeah.
I hate that. Despite all this, somehow, Gary made it out the door. His legs moved stiffly, dragging through the back entrance of the shop out into the alley behind. Each step felt like a battle. Muscles firing out of sequence, lungs constricting, vision tunneling. He knew he didn't have a lot of time. Ahead, Darren was already in his red Ford, calmly placing his jacket and his little backpack in the passenger seat. He looked as if he had all the time in the world. No rush, no hesitation. Gary reached, this is funny that it said this exact word, the sandwich board sign. Have you ever heard that term?
No, I have no idea what that is.
I thought the same thing. I'm literally picturing like a billboard of a sandwich. I don't know why.
I'm picturing the board that has the menu when you go to a restaurant.
Like up on the wall?
Or just like out front.
Okay, you're way closer than me.
So I'm on it.
So you're actually spot on. I was like trying to mislead you, like inside the restaurant. Yeah, you know those like little stands, like they look like A's from the side.
Yeah.
And like chalk on it. It's like come on
So
in.
I crushed it.
Okay, yeah, you got that big time. Well, anyways, Gary, despite being like literally in horrible condition, reached for that sandwich board sign and dragged it in front of the vehicle, using the last of his strength to block Darren's exit. This is funny to me. When I first heard this, I was like, that little sign out front is going to block a vehicle?
Yeah.
The sign itself obviously wouldn't do much against the vehicle. But what's interesting to me is like, why didn't Darren just run it over and keep going? But I guess like from just reading through, I guess speculation would be, one, maybe he didn't want to cause a scene. It's like it's a small area. You have all the open shops next door. Maybe he didn't want to make a lot of noise. Maybe Gary was in the way. He didn't want to run him over of some sort. But what's weird to me is that maybe he thought calmness would keep him innocent. Whatever it was, he stayed in the car and he just watched. Across the alley, Susan Allen heard the noise and she stepped out just in time to see Gary collapse. Gary screams out like that Darren injected him with something, and he didn't really even have much of a voice at this point. It was hoarse. It was struggling to breathe at this point. Susan rushed aside while others kind of gathered around. It was a small crowd. It was like the taxi driver and like another shopper. So it was like just a few people around. But still, Darren didn't move. He's sitting in his vehicle behind his wheel, hands rested on his thighs, face unreadable. Susan, kind of the hero of the hour, dialed 911. Oh, 999. We're in Europe.
Oh.
Dialed 999 and let them know exactly what was happening. That Gary was fading fast, his lips turning blue. Every second mattered now. He was conscious, but hardly. Paramedics arrived within minutes, and they loaded him into a stretcher, oxygen mask pressed his face, and Darren still sitting, watching, expressionless.
What's the point of this thing?
That's the question. Keep that in mind. I want you to try and figure that out by the end.
All right.
The ambulance pulled away from the alley as the tension outside Better Days settled into stunned silence. Inside the vehicle, Gary was still conscious, but barely, and his breath was shallowing and his pulse erratic. Until then, it finally stopped. Gary Lewis flatlined. The paramedics didn't hesitate. CPR was initiated immediately. A flurry of action filled this like little tiny space. They're in a little ambulance. Oxygen forced into his lungs, drugs pumping through his veins, monitors beeping as seconds stretched thin. And after what had must felt like hours, compressed into just a few moments, Gary's heart stuttered and then pumped once again, and he was alive for now. But it wasn't over. The drive to the hospital was nothing short of chaotic. All hands were on deck, doing everything to stabilize his vitals, but the dose Gary took through that injection was putting up a good fight. By the time they reached James Cook University Hospital, which is kind of like a cruel irony, this is the same place that Darren has spent the last 2 decades working.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, very creepy. By the time he got there, Gary's body, still gripped by the effects of the rocuronium. Wait, I know how to do it. Rocuronium. There we go. Began to shut down again, and his heart stopped for a second time.
Dang. So they can't just put oxygen in his lungs or whatever? They can't just like put a tube in there?
That's what I would think,
because I feel like that's what they did in the surgeries, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that,
or they just don't know what's going on.
I think that's a factor for sure, is that they don't even know what's inside of his system.
Yeah.
But also, he had such a high dosage too, so it's like if his organs were like shutting down without already having the oxygen and stuff, I wonder if it like wasn't even responding well to the oxygen. Because usually it's like they start on such lower dosages that maybe it was more manageable for like patients to receive oxygen. I don't know the details. If you're a medical professional, let us know. But yeah, so the whole scene is confusing for the paramedics. Like all they know is they don't really know anything actually. They hardly know that he was injected. And they're like, what is this? How is this guy dying all of a sudden really so fast? But then like I said, his heart has stopped for that second time. Whether it be from the CPR, the medication, Gary's literal strength or will to live, or literally maybe even just the grace of God, they got him back. And his heart beat again.
Nice.
Twice he clinically died.
Oh, wow.
And twice he was revived.
He's a fighter.
He's a fighter. When I like first heard about this case, everyone's like, this guy's a freaking ox of a man. Like he is in his 60s. Like he's been retired for a while. And the fact that he was even able to trace after Darren, everyone's like, that physically probably shouldn't have been possible. Wow. Yeah, this guy's a strong man. The court later heard that without immediate intervention from bystanders and paramedics, like I said, Gary would not have survived. Every moment from injection to resuscitation had unfolded on a razor-thin timeline. He had stared death in the face, and death has actually lost this time. Gary Lewis wasn't the kind of man you expected to collapse. He was built like a retired boxer, people say. Broad-shouldered, heavy-footed, with a kind of quiet toughness that he didn't announce himself, but he had a presence. Those 30 years in the police force had carved a sharp edge into him, but it was his restraint that made him formidable. He didn't flinch easy, didn't back down. Even as a record shop owner, there was something unmistakably unshakable about him. And on that day A paralytic drug shut down his body, and it was just sheer grit, not luck, that got him out of that shop.
Dang.
Like I said, most men would have dropped right there. I don't know what it is, but I guess he has that force and that will to survive.
Yeah.
But Darren's kind of like
cool.
a coward. Darren is kind of like a loser for just watching this all happen. And first,
And
making it
doing
happen.
it.
Yeah, making it happen. But then just quietly watching it and pretending he's innocent by saying it's just water. And then he just sat there and he's like, maybe if I don't react, no one's going to think it's me. But that didn't work for him. Darren Harris was actually arrested at the scene and charged with attempted murder. In court, the prosecution laid out a methodical case. He had made a visit on May 29th, almost like he was surveying the potential area, the potential victim. Kind of like you were saying on the day of the incident on July 2nd. He kept coming back, and it just seems like it was a little bit more planned, especially considering he brought the stolen drug with him. He stayed at the shop for over 3 hours across multiple visits before the attack.
I wonder if it's like some weird fantasy he has to like do this
Attack.
thing. Attack. Yeah, like make someone like not be able to move or something weird.
Yeah, I am with you on that, actually. There was no motive that he came forth and said. There was no known dispute. Darren claimed Gary had thrown him out of the shop previously, but there is no record of that. Gary comes back and says he's only had confrontation with one guy, and it was outside the shop, and it was so memorable because it was one guy, and it definitely wasn't Darren.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there was actually CCTV footage as well. That is not made public, so we don't get to see it. However, the jury did get to see it, and because of that, they were able to have a play-by-play of how the day went. The judge said to Darren that you administered a hospital drug in a deliberate act of violence. He described Darren's demeanor as chillingly calm. Witness said that Darren showed no...
Calm under pressure.
Calm under pressure. That's where it came back around.
Yeah.
Darren showed no concern. He didn't try to help Gary. He watched as this man's life slipped away. And like I said, or like you said, maybe he had this weird thing. According to the courts, there was
like
no
a
motive.
fantasy fetish.
Yeah, according to like what I read in like the court case documents and stuff, it doesn't say that there was a motive. But when I was reading about like who he was and like his interaction with Susan made it seem like it could be something like that. Reason being, as I guess when Darren went to go hang out in the vintage shop and talk to Susan, he was told her about his story of how he watched a procedure of some sort. I think it was like an emergency case, but he visually saw a heart like slow down completely before they were able to bring him back or something along those lines. And when I read her statement, I was like, I feel like that has to do definitely with just his interest, which creeps me out.
Yeah.
And the fact that he obviously had access to all this pharmacy drugs and whatnot.
Yeah. It's kind of along the lines of, I don't think it's a TV show. I think it's a real person. I can't remember. Maybe it's a TV show. But the guy would like kill the person, but then revive him because he likes the like feeling of like saving someone or something weird like that.
Wait, that sounds so familiar.
Maybe it was a Criminal Minds.
I was about to say, maybe it's Criminal Minds. I mean, there's a chance, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's a real life scenario either. People have weird things that they feel like they need to be the hero, or they feel like they need to kind of play God where they have someone else's life in their hands. Mm-hmm. Leeds Crown Court buzzed with anticipation as the trial of Darren Harris entered to its fifth day on January 28th, 2025. So this is like literally a couple months ago.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The prosecution carefully laid out the facts in chronological order. Each step pointed to cold, clinical intent. The jury watched that CCTV footage, like I mentioned, from May 29th and from July 2nd, where they literally could see... I think it's just a street view, but from my understanding, it sounds like it was mainly that they saw Darren go in and out, whatever, and Gary running out, blocking the car, and collapsing.
Of 2024?
Yeah, that was of 2024.
Okay.
So now we're in the court of, we're now in court of January 2025. No photos of Gary or the footage has been made public, but this is just from their own accounts. Some key witnesses and their testimonies in this court case was actually Gary Lewis himself. I'm like, how? Come on. How does Darren be like, nah? And Gary's like, I literally lived it. I watched it all happen. But Gary Lewis, the victim, took the stand first, and he described being pricked in the back, knowing it wasn't a knife, but he knew something was there, feeling his muscles lock immediately, breath constricting, and his mind racing. He's quoted saying, I lost the ability to speak. I panicked. I knew I was dying. He watched me die, and he did nothing.
Dang, that's crazy.
What a strong testimony. Like, I bet the jury's like, okay, guilty. Like,
can they consider it murder because he died and was brought back?
That's a cool thought.
That's not.
I mean, no, that's like, I mean, he'll be put away longer.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting because then he can have like the worst punishment for doing such a cruel act. In this case, it was not charged as regular homicide.
Attempted?
Yeah.
Murder?
Attempted. That's interesting, though. I wonder how that would come up in a court case. But anyways, his testimony emphasized the calculated nature of the attack and his own efforts to chase Darren outside, despite increasingly intense paralysis. Paralysis?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For some reason, I was like, isn't that like a sleeping disorder?
No.
Paralysis. Okay.
It's like.
Now I'm thinking of the sleeping disorder.
Sleep.
What is paralysis? Oh yeah, because you literally can't move. We're so dumb. People probably just like hate us. We're like, I'm so uneducated. We do what we can.
Yeah, we're pilots.
Yeah, we don't know anything else. No, but Susan Allen was the next to take the stand. She confirmed her initial conversation with Darren and his calm demeanor afterward. She described finding Darren collapsed, telling the courtroom that he looked so pale and that she dialed 999, and Darren just sat there and didn't help at all, which obviously points to more guilt towards Darren. Mm-hmm. Any normal person would jump to help anybody that was in
and danger. No sense of remorse.
Yeah, that's what creeps me out.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you do something like that and just sit back and watch? Mm-hmm. How do you do anything like that, but still? So then the paramedic crews delivered expert testimony. Their account was chilling. Gary flatlining twice, first in the ambulance and then again upon arrival at James Cook University Hospital. They confirmed only immediate CPR, oxygen, and strictly adrenaline is what saved his life, without which he would have absolutely for sure died. An anesthetics expert testified on the rocuronium and explained that the 100 milligram dose was far higher than necessary, and without ventilation, it causes total respiratory paralysis within minutes. And so it seems as though absolutely had the desire to kill. There's no doubt about that. It just shows how strong Gary is. Before the jury was impaneled, Darren admitted to administering a noxious substance, a clear confession to injecting Gary, but he claimed he thought it was just water still to this day, and that Gary had earlier ejected him from the shop, and that he was heated, all this stuff. But there was...
Why would he do water then?
That's the thing. It's like, oh, I thought it was water. First of all, where'd you even get the syringe? You would know if you put water.
Why'd you bring a drug with you?
Yeah, why'd you bring a drug with you? Why'd you even have a syringe with you?
Yeah, I feel like it's weirder to have the drug with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to know if you brought a drug or water.
Yeah.
Like, stupid argument. And then, I mean, there's no evidence that they've ever had a dispute anyways. Mm-hmm. Which is even weirder.
Crazy guy.
During cross-examination, Darren's calm, emotionless demeanor was still holding up, and it drew attention. He repeated the water claim. He offered no motive and no remorse. His composure contrasted sharply with the emotional turmoil of victim and witness statements. So it's like the fact that it was such a scary emotional thing for everybody, and he's the only one not having an emotional reaction, rubbed the jury very wrongly, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. After closing arguments, the jury moved swiftly. Only 5 days since trial began. Well, let me tell you. How long do you think they deliberated?
5 days.
Okay. No. Guess again.
2 hours.
Better guess. For me, this is a world record.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. It was just 24 minutes
Oh, wow.
that this jury, deliberated. And, of course, in return, it came back unanimous guilty verdict for attempted murder. The speed surprised the judge. Like, okay, sweet. But it was like such a clear conclusion that Darren intended to kill. Also, I actually looked this up. I think the fastest jury ever was 1 minute long.
Dang.
Yeah. And then the longest was 4.5 months.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. And both are like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. But 24 minutes is speedy.
Very fast.
Judge Phillips didn't mince his words whatsoever. Life in prison, at least 15 years, and 84 days behind bars before Darren Harris could even be considered for release.
Yeah.
And even then, only if the parole board believed the man who watched someone die without even blinking was safe to walk free.
Yeah. And normally I feel like you have to like admit that you did something wrong and have remorse in order to get paroled.
Show
Doesn't
that
sound like
you've
you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you like don't even confess to anything, like how are you going to prove that you're a better changed person?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Also, I always find it interesting with like 15 years and 84 days. Where'd you get those 84 days from? I wonder
Probably calculate.
Yeah, let's say I wonder like what the system is in order to come up with those numbers.
Yeah.
Either way, he's behind bars now for 15 years.
There's like a podcast I listened to, Matthew Cox, and he was saying how like I can't remember, but it was like one thing was like a certain amount of months or days.
Oh.
So like maybe they have a similar thing where it's like you can get 5 things off your sentence. That's like each thing is like a certain amount of months.
Makes sense.
So, or a certain amount of days or something like that. So
that's what I figured. It had to be like some sort of calculations. Like these things lead, like each thing is like 30 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they have some sort of system in place to get a ballpark number or something along the lines.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested to find out more. I wonder if anyone actually knows that answer. So let us know, but I'm going to look it up regardless. The judge called it a miracle that Gary survived. Obviously, it's definitely a miracle for sure. And also, it was a tragedy that anyone capable of this had once been trusted with other people's lives. Yeah. I mean, he's worked in the health department for over 20 years. How
might be
scary.
a good thing to look into some of the deaths that might have happened.
That'd be interesting.
There's been a lot of those kind of things, I think, where it's like, maybe it's another show I've watched, but
no, I think this is real.
Yeah, like they like nurses and doctors have like killed people.
Yeah, that's freaky. Mm-hmm. I've definitely heard that. So I think it's real unless we're all watching all the same stuff. Very likely, though.
It's hard to mesh.
I know. Nothing. Yeah, you can't really tell them apart. But I have heard of situations where, like, doctors or nurses are a contributing factor to people's passing. Mm-hmm. That'd be interesting to look up. I wonder if anyone's doing that. But like I said, Gary showed superhuman strength, all while getting the bad guy behind bars basically on his own. The fact that he was the one that chased him down, blocked him off, all this stuff, like Darren had no connection with him. Mm-hmm. Like maybe Susan could have been like, "Oh, this guy came by," but besides that, if he just drove 40 minutes home,
that's the only thing they have in common.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, how weird. Mm-hmm. Whatever. Gary Lewis survived a medical grade assassination attempt. He died twice. He stood up, dragged his body into the street, and fought back. He openly talks about how he is alive but not the same. Every day he relives that moment. He's actually back in the shop working.
Watch his back at all times.
That's what he said. He's like, I literally I can't trust anyone. Like, I can't have my back towards anyone. I'm like,
especially because they're all strangers. They're all customers.
Right. It's like he works in an environment where you meet someone new every day. And now that you have this fear that you never know people's intention. And that's why I asked in the beginning, do you think people are born dangerous or they become dangerous? Because this guy seemed like he was a pretty normal dude all his life. Mm-hmm. Like, what causes someone to do such a horrible, horrible act? Like a complete stranger.
Yeah. This sounds like a fantasy to me.
Yeah, it does sound like really
Or like some kind of like
curiosity.
Yeah.
That's how I felt it. Like, because I asked you earlier to remember like why you think the motive was. He never has come out for himself to say what it was. For me, I think it was a curiosity.
Only been a couple months.
Yeah, I mean maybe one day he'll say something. Yeah. For me, it seems like a curiosity. The way he described to Susan that like he has seen hearts slow and stuff. Maybe that's like the same ballpark as fantasy. But it seems like he wants, especially if he's a regular guy, maybe he wants control.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he's never felt like he's had control in his life.
Yeah.
And he's always like the low man on the totem pole, wants to be in control or something.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's something along those lines.
Yeah, but who knows?
Not us. One day we'll have an update, hopefully, with more information. But Gary, to this day, says that he knows how lucky he is to be here. So this was the devastating case and the most bizarre case ever. When I heard it recently, I was like, people are doing that just a couple months ago down the street. Not down the street. Down the street from each other.
Across the pond?
Across the pond, across the country. Yeah.
I thought you said it was in...
Across the ocean in Europe.
Yeah, in Europe.
Yeah, across countries. It's just crazy to me that people are actually out there doing this stuff and how rare it is. So this was the bizarre case of survivor Gary Lewis and his attempted murderer, Darren Harris.
Dang.
So a little bit of a different case. We have a survivor.
Dang, Darren.
Survivor this time. So I felt like we should have a survivor after a couple dark previous podcasts. We'll keep the rotation going to kind of pique everybody's curiosity. Never know what's coming next.
Alrighty.
What do you got for us?
What do you want to know?
Ooh.
All right. So first one we have here is Harold Shipman.
Okay.
He's considered the most prolific serial killer in modern history.
Oh my gosh, how come we don't know his name?
I don't know.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, he was a general practitioner in the UK.
That's fine.
And he had an estimate of 215 to 250 victims. Shipman killed mostly elderly female patients by administering lethal doses of morphine. He was convicted in 2000 and later died by suicide in prison. He continued working for over 2 decades without being caught due to his respectable reputation.
That's crazy.
It's like that thing. I've heard that kind of stuff before.
That's exactly what we were just talking about. How scary that he slid by for so long because he was like respected in his field.
Yeah, this is like the same type of one. Charles Cullen.
Okay.
The Good Nurse.
Is he also a serial killer? I assume so.
Yeah.
Wow.
ICU and cardiac nurse in the USA. He has 40 victims that he's killed, and estimated but some estimates are suggested up to 400.
Holy, that's a fat range. 40 to 400?
Well, he's admitted to 40, and they think that it could be as high as 400.
I can't imagine like your loved one dies in the hospital and you think it's like natural causes or whatever. You realize they had an evil doctor.
Yeah. This guy would also inject lethal doses of insulin, digoxin, and other drugs.
Medicine.
Oh no. And he was repeatedly hired even after being flagged for suspicious behavior because hospitals didn't report him to protect their reputations. I've heard of this guy. I've heard that.
Really?
Yeah, they like wouldn't report because they didn't want to damage their own reputation. So he just kept going and getting another job, saying like, "Oh
wait,
yeah, I got let go."
Sound familiar.
But I'm a good guy.
Right. That's so sad. What people do to cover up just to keep a good face.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple more. Let's do this one. This one was this is Beverly. I don't know how to say her last name, but she's known as the Angel of Death. Yeah, she's a pediatric nurse, and her victims: 4 murdered and 9 injured. She poisoned children with insulin or potassium injections. Her motive is believed to be Munchkin syndrome by proxy, causing harm to gain attention and sympathy.
What's Munchkin syndrome?
It is a rare but disturbing mental health condition where a caregiver intentionally causes or fabricates illness in someone else, usually a child, to gain attention, sympathy, or a sense of control. I think that's what that one lady had who or potentially, who basically made her daughter take a bunch of medicine and pretend she was sick and like dying, and then her
Rose.
Yeah, Gypsy Rose.
Wow.
Kind of sounds like her mom had that.
That's interesting. Yeah. Oh, you're right.
So
That's crazy. So there's crazy people out there. I guess. I guess we weren't just watching a movie. That's a real life thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, seriously.
And I just thought this case was fascinating and horrific, and watched your back, I suppose.
Yeah. Be careful, I guess, who you trust.
Yeah, terrifying. But thank you for tuning in this week for Siblings in Crime. We will be back next Wednesday with another episode.